Welcome to Untold Trails, a storytelling podcast exploring the people, races, brands, and moments that shape trail and fell running. I'm Scott.
And I'm Fraser. Untold Trails. Stories from the trails. Past, present, and what comes next. Every August, as darkness falls over Chamonix, thousands of runners gather beneath the church tower. They've travelled from every corner of the world for one defining moment. As the opening chords of Vangelis's Conquest of Paradise echo through the valley, years of preparation suddenly become real. But how did one mountain race become the dream of an entire sport? So here we go. UTMB, Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, Chasing Paradise. Why don't we tell people why we're making this podcast today, Scott, and what it's about?
Well, UTMB is the biggest trail race in the world, and it's now the biggest trail organisation in the world. And Mont Blanc is arguably the best setting in the world for trail running. It is paradise for many people. You've just got to take a look at the surroundings. Maybe anyone can see the picture behind us. The Mont Blanc massive, and the mountains up there is absolutely beautiful. Everyone who's there comes back at some point in their life, and everyone just can't stop looking up at the mountains all the time. It's paradise. Now, you've had about 20 years experience with paradise, with Mont Blanc and Chamonix. Tell us about that and your experience and how you got into all of this.
My first connection with Chamonix probably went back to round about 2006, and my dad had discovered Chamonix with his wife Kath back in the early 2000s. They'd actually fallen into Chamonix by accident. I think it was probably because the Mont Blanc tunnel would have been closed, so it must have been early 2000, and they travelled around Switzerland and come in the back way to stay in La Blanche. I don't think it was until they were kind of leaving that they drove into the Chamonix Valley, and they went into town, and they were like, oh, this place is very nice, isn't it? Over the next couple of visits, they fell in love with it. They decided to come back, and my dad ended up to all of our surprise, and even to his wife's, I think, buying a property out there. And that would have been around about 2005.
Is that in the valley or in Chamonix?
Yeah, near the hospital, down the straight road of Mile of Doom, walking back from there after a few beers at night. Yeah, near the hospital down there. So anyway, I'd never really heard of Chamonix. So I was my father was explaining about this valley to me, and he says, you should see everyone, that they look like they've been chipped or chiselled out of granite. They're full of mountaineers and skiers and all that. So
outdoor people.
Yeah, so I was very intrigued, obviously. And then we went out for the first time it was May. And I just remember one of the first memories I've got of it is waking up in the morning. Maybe we'd arrived in the dark or the cloud. I can't really remember. And looking out the window and looking up, and you see the Bossons. The Bossons Glacier,
yeah,
which is the junction that we've obviously been up to, with the Mont Blanc Dome behind it, and just being absolutely awestruck by what I saw, the blue skies. And then, during that trip, just discovering Chamonix. I think what was kind of funny story that evening probably was me and Catherine got dressed up, shoes on, shirt on. Thought, right, let's hit the town. I think we were going to the casino first, and then dinner, like you do. But then going into one of the local pubs and just thinking, no one else has got shoes and shirts on here. They feel completely out of place. This is a proper mountain town. This is Chamonix. It was a great introduction for us.
So you fell in love with Chamonix. When did you really fall in love with the UTMB or the trail running side of Chamonix?
Well, originally when we went, we first visited in summer, but for me it felt like a mountain town. So our first introduction to the mountains was through skiing. So on our forthcoming visits over the following few years, we explored the skiing, and we went in the winter. So I wasn't a runner back then, and I guess I didn't even really understand what was possible in the mountains. Our first introduction to the mountains was many years later when I came back, and it was the Mont Blanc marathon weekend. And
around June time.
That would have been June, yeah. And that was the first time I saw a trail race in the Alps. And that was being woken up in the middle of the night to hundreds and thousands of runners outside the hotel setting off on a race that we didn't know anything about. And
probably the 80k race that sets off in the middle of the morning, early morning.
Yeah. So that's 3 a.m. there, and that kind of opened up my eyes to a whole new Chamonix. And the trail racing. That would have been 10 years later. So for the previous,
about 2006, or
that would have been 2016-ish, yeah. So for the previous decade, it was more about exploring Chamonix's other many things to do there, and then moving on maybe to other ski resorts and things like that, and trying out Morzine, because there's more to the Alps than just Chamonix, of course, isn't there?
So around 2016, you were already running, but was that the first time you went out trail running in the mountains then?
Probably was, yeah. And it was, and discovering that race was just opened up my eyes to what was possible there. 3 months later, I was stood on the start line in Zermatt. A couple of years later, I was back in Chamonix. But I think the key point is that I discovered Chamonix, and then I discovered trail running, and then I discovered UTMB. So for many people, you might first discover UTMB through passion for the sport and through what you find in the books and online. But for me, it was the other way around.
And I guess I'm a witness to you falling in love again with Paradise, because I think one of the first times I went, you took me up La Jonction. Your eyes were just as ecstatic as my eyes were. You were just as still in awe of the place as what I was on the first timer.
And I think that's the thing about Chamonix in the Valley is doesn't really matter how many times you go back, but you'll get your camera out or the phone. You spend the first 3 days taking pictures. You have to stop yourself from being kind of absorbed by its beauty, even though it might be a place that you're quite familiar with. I mean, how did you feel when you first went to Chamonix? What your first introduction to it?
Well, if anyone looks at my Strava files, and definitely attest to that, of how long I do stop to take photos. My mileage is very slow. Not just the steepness of the valleys, but taking that footage all the time. I guess I go back. My first introduction was through the TV or through the live stream of UTMB, becoming a trail runner in around the same time, 2015, 2014, 15, living in Asia. Chamonix was a long way away, but it was this mystical place that the best trail runners in the world would go to run this, one of the best races. So it was something that was always far away on a screen. It looked amazing. And then I think the first time I went was after lockdown, about 2022, and I'd actually run a race in Zermatt as well. So one of the Ultrax Sky races over there. And because it was 2 weeks before UTMB or 10 days before UTMB, I could then go and watch UTMB. And I think my first experience of Chamonix was like, I was starstruck. I was like, oh my goodness, this place is absolutely crazy. And I think I'd left the campsite in Zermatt, it was snowing, and when I came to Chamonix, the kind of sun came out.
Yeah, I remember escaping the weather.
Later that day, so I went from snow in the middle of August to sort of the sun was coming out in Chamonix. And again, I'm just looking up at the glaciers. And going, oh my goodness, it's just almost on top of you when you get there. So there is something uniquely special about that. And when I interviewed the mayor and we asked the mayor of Chamonix, why do people keep coming back? He said, there's only one place in the world, one valley in the world that's like this, And I think I'd vouch for his statement on that. It's a very, very unique place. Just on UTMB though, I went there to watch UTMB that year. I'd seen pictures of the fans at UTMB, and hence trail fans. And as a fan, I went to watch, and I thought, right, I'm going to watch this. And I went to first evening up to Contamese and to Notre Dame de Gauge. And I was in that tunnel of lights and fire and fireworks and smoke bombs going off as people hit 30 miles and they're going up the paved gorge up there. And I was like, yeah, this is what I wanted. This is what it's like to not just be a runner, but to be a fan of the sport. And this was like the Tour de France, what you've seen on the Tour de France. And I think the spectacle of trail running was writ large there, that it can be a fan sport as well as just a participation sport.
The UTMB is obviously very different to other forms of racing, and there's a lot of divided opinions about popularity or the growth of UTMB and its place in the sport these days.
For sure, I mean, for some people, UTMB is still that paradise that they aim to be at. And for others, it's kind of losing its paradise. But we can go into that as we get through the discussion here today.
How did Chamonix feel different to you? Because you have travelled in the mountains for most of your adult life and familiar with other areas. So what's different about Chamonix?
So when I reflect on what the mayor said to me, it's a unique place, I'm thinking of like Silverton in the US that I've been to, and Flagstaff, and then you're going down to Queenstown in New Zealand as a mountain town, and then sort of obviously Keswick in the UK would be the closest maybe, and then other places in Asia as well where there's big sort of mountain towns. Chamonix is unique. I think it's not even like Zermatt, because Zermatt's one road in and one road out, and there's no cars, but there's a valley running through it. So there's many exit points to Chamonix. So just the vast array of things you can do there in summer and in winter, whether you're a winter sports person or a summer sports person or both, over the seasons, the amount of trails and the amount of mountains there are there is just phenomenal, and it's all accessible. You've just got to have a good engine.
Surrounded, aren't you? It's almost 360. If you take the valley up to Les Houches and back to Argentière, but literally if you're still in Chamonix town, it is, no matter where you look, and if you understand the trail system and how they work, it's all accessible.
And I just spent 2 weeks there, and I spent, like you said, I spent a little bit of time the central trails directly out of Chamonix, then I spent a little bit of time down in Saint-Doz and that side, Sauvage, and down Le Housse side, and then up the valley in Argentière and Vallorcine. So you can have 3 days up there, 3 days down there, and you're still not done, you're still not satisfied. And then if you're going over the back, again, it opens up into Switzerland on that side. And so it's endless possibilities. So I think it really is a unique place. And you can keep coming back. And as one young guy said to me, he said, like, I've visited 4 times and I fall in love every time. And it is paradise for him and for many others.
I remember going out probably that first weekend we arrived as well, and went into Bardot, and still looks pretty much exactly the same. One of the only local bars that's probably kept its real rustic look in town. And we bumped into a guy that I hadn't seen for like 5 years or something like that, and we used to be really good friends. And I was like, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I live here." Wow. It's all sort of like that weekend when I'm leaving for the first time, I was thinking, I want to live here. It's, and it does have that pull on people, doesn't it? You'll speak to so many people that have been on holiday and then they literally do go back to live, and you start working out, well, could I do that? How could I do that? And, if it wasn't for circumstances, I think we probably would have done.
On this trip, I bumped into 2 people on the campsite that I've met over the last four years, and one guy's lived in the valley and he's a bit jaded, but he's moved out now and he keeps coming back. And the other guy's been going for 30, 40 years. He's a climber, he's an alpinist, and he's still got lines that he wants to try and conquer. He's still got challenges in the mountains he needs to try and crack.
And in terms of mountaineering, how did that shape today's trail culture, would you say?
If we're going back deep into history, and sort of the Guides Association in Chamonix is 200 years old, and their histories they've got this history book. It's a story of adaptation, and this is the story of the Chamonix Guides Company. So they're going back 200 years from guiding people up into the higher, above sort of 3,000 meters sort of mountains on the massif, largely on the Mont Blanc massif. Mountaineering, if we're going back sort of 200 or 300 years, the first people to sort of conquer the Alps, and there's obviously books written about Edward Whymper and other British guys that went out and conquered the Alps, and the first summits of Zermatt and the first summits of Mont Blanc. And this sort of growing alpinism, or this sport of alpinism in the high mountains of the Alps. And that really did shape the town. I think even now, in a time when, if you visit, like I did in July, if you visit when there's no races on, I would say there's probably still more mountaineers there, or budding mountaineers, or climbers, or rock climbers, because that's quite, there's 15, 20 different
paragliders. They climb up and then jump off.
The paragliders and the multi-sport people, you might jump off once you've got up there, or there's the specific people who are just ice climbers, which might not be happening as much more in the winter. So there's so many different mountain sports that have shaped Chamonix before trail running came. And you're thinking trail running just really came this century. So the 21st century was when trail running came largely to the valley en masse. But before that, I mean, you think it's the home of the Winter Olympics. The first ever Winter Olympics was 1924 in Chamonix Valley, the first ever Winter Olympics. I think the Winter Olympics are coming back the next time to Chamonix, not to Chamonix, to the Alps, but Chamonix not got part of it. But it just shows it's the home of winter sports.
Yeah.
So no matter which winter sport you look at, whether it's ski jumping or ice hockey, there is a centre there that's renowned for winter sports. So it's a paradise for anyone wanting to learn winter sports or wanting to grind their teeth and improve their winter sports.
Yeah, it's a true valley of discovery, isn't it? I mean, if you go into the centre of town, you've got the statue of the people pointing up to Mont Blanc, which depicts when the first people climbed and reached Mont Blanc. They thought it was haunted. You couldn't stay on the mountain overnight. It took a long time for that to happen.
Yeah, they were chasing dragons. I mean, I think it was the Romans were the first one to go over the passes, and there was these trade routes that were around the sort of foothills of the valleys. And people did think it was an ugly sight. People down in the valley, sort of 500, 600, 700 years ago, they were scared of going up there. It was full of ghosts. Similar to here, we've got Penderlow up here, and there was witches, and so they thought these places were out of bounds, and they were dangerous for humans. I think they even brought in the Bishop of Annecy to exercise the glacier, because they thought the glacier was going to come down and submerge the villages in the towns.
And this is a fantastic picture that shows the Mer de Glace, the sea of ice that would have come all the way down to the village at one point. And I think there was like a 40-metre wall of ice, and they were worried that it was going to literally engulf the village at one point. Now they're retreating. You can it's very hard to see them.
Well, luckily for the Bishop of Annecy, apparently the year after he must have
had there.
Well, even within a year it receded a little bit. So obviously his fee was worth paying. So I think they carried on paying for a few years. But now we've got a different emergency. We've got sustainability, and we've got a climate emergency where you've got this really receding glaciers, and it's an experiment, an incubation place for climate change is the mountains, and so this is actually causing maybe a shift more to summer sports. As winter sports become more and more difficult, or you've got to adapt to what you can do in the winter. And trail running is it becoming the new skiing, in the mountains? It's, if you look at brands and the way that their consumption is shifting, people buying more trail running gear, and ski companies are now selling trail running shoes. So
I think Chamonix kind of owned the trail running in the Alps in that respect of the most popular destination. Where you got Morzine not too far away, who have really captured the mountain bike scene. Every ski shop is a mountain bike shop in the summer. There's a big change and big adaptation, and my personal journey was the winter season through to the summer season.
So everything we've talked about points to one conclusion. Chamonix didn't need trail running to become legendary. Trail running needed Chamonix. But if Chamonix was already legendary, how did one race become the most important race in trail running?
How important was Chamonix before UTMB?
Well, very important. If you look at that, as we've just mentioned, the deep history of mountaineering, the deep history of winter sports in the valley, and obviously tourism has been a major part in the last, say, 150 years, growing tourism is the main economy. Now, interestingly, when they founded UTMB, they went for the end of August, that final week in August, which for us in Britain is Bank Holiday weekend as such. They went for that August Bank Holiday weekend in UK terms they went for that because the summer season was finishing in the middle of August. It was finishing around the 15th of August, and people would pack up for the summer. The winter season, the skiing would start early December. So there was this 2 or 3 week window where tourist numbers dropped off, and they said, well, let's try and do it there. And I think the whole town was massively in favour of UTMB, and those first years the numbers picked up, and it was such a vibe. Locals were volunteering, everyone was all on board, and they were seeing this amazing thing going on. But at first nobody knew if it was possible to run around the mountain or run around the massif. It filled a gap, did that. So I think the question might be, if UTMB hadn't have happened, what would Chamonix be like? It would still be a mountain town. It would still be full of tourists over the summer. I think 2.5 million people visit Chamonix year round every year. So I don't know how much of those are actually trail runners. The trail running figures for that week in August aren't much higher than, say, the tourist figures for middle of July, but they've added an extra 2 or 3 weeks of tourism onto the back end of their summer.
So how did UTMB become the centre of trail running?
Where do we start? I mean, it's a long story going back. And you mentioned earlier the fire, I think, in the Chamonix tunnel, which connects France to Italy. So from basically it goes out the back of Chamonix and comes underneath the Mont Blanc Massif and comes out in Courmayeur on the Italian side. And there was a fire in the tunnel and it closed for years. This was, I think, it was before the 2000s. I think it was about 1998. But it started people thinking, and one of our main arteries of tourism into the valley has been cut off for some time before they repaired that. And at the time, I think there'd been this relay race around Mont Blanc. I think it was 3 or 4 legs. People took turns. And I think that had failed after the tunnel had...
Yeah, because it was a huge centre of sports in Chamonix.
Yeah, but trail running wasn't at the centre of the sport at that time.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Was there was is it Chamonix de Sports or something like that? And they organise all these different events, of which the relay would have been one of those.
That's correct. At that time, the Palettis were looking around, but they were working with Mr. Bachelard. We're going to butcher these French names now. I haven't improved my French.
René Bachelard.
René Bachelard.
Bachelard.
Oui.
To be corrected.
C'est bon. So, René.
Yeah, we're now in 2000.
I guess the century 2001, 2, they were looking around. René was with Michel Paletti, who was into his trail running.
Yeah.
And he moved back to the valley with his wife.
And they would have been a young couple at this point in time.
Yeah, and they got started a record store. So in Chamonix-Sud on the, I think it's the Avenue de Aiguille de Midi, they had a record store on there. So they were they decided not to live in Paris, and they decided to come back to the mountains because I think Michel was the soul person and this was where his soul was, and they loved the mountains. Just a familiar story for many people.
Ironically, René had moved to Chamonix, having retired. So he was
getting on a bit.
He was 60 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
Started trail running at 60.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Yeah. Because then he went on to do lots of these UTMBs, but we digress.
So they hatched this idea to, basically, let's have a race around the Mont Blanc Massif. Let's do one full lap of the mountain area.
I mean, who comes up with that?
Well, exactly, but they had no idea whether it was actually possible
to run it.
And I think let's just stop and give props to 2 people that we've talked to in detail. But the race that changed running, so Doug Mayer, thanks Doug, not just for the book, but for interviewing with us and sitting down and talking us through all this history. And then Keith Byrne. Keith Byrne has worked for North Face since around 1999. He started off in the UK and he's now pretty high up in North Face in Denver, Colorado, British guy.
If anyone's ever listened to the UTMB commentary, they will be very familiar with his voice.
Yeah, Keith has been volunteer commentator on the live broadcast of UTMB since it first started in 2015.
Yes.
But if we go back, Catherine Paletti was more the marketeer. Michel Paletti was more the runner, and he was into the route and how this would all play out and how it would logistically work as a race organizer. His wife Catherine was the marketeer. So they were out looking for sponsors, and they ran into a woman called Carla, who was the North Face French representative, and they were looking for sponsors, and she called up a guy called Toffer Gaylord, and Toffer Gaylord was the European rep for North Face, American guy who was into trail running. He said, "This sounds amazing, great." So they came in from the start. Toffer, I think, ran the first race.
Yeah.
And came second overall, I think, in the first race in 2003. Again, we will digress a little bit, but that was the start of the race.
Yeah, so, I think Doug describes it really well in his book, doesn't he? Where one of them actually rang back to North Face and said, "We've found something. Yeah. You need to come and see this. Trust me." That was the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah. And I think Carla and the French team ran with that, and Carla's been involved ever since as well. I think she's still involved in the finish line, and even though I think the North Face relationship as Keith explained, finished in 2015. They got a new marketing director, I think globally, and they had a different sort of trajectory that they wanted to do. So their official relationship stopped, and Keith was saying, "Hey, what can I do to stay involved?" And Catherine Paletti said, "Well, we're starting this live broadcast. Why don't you come on and be a live broadcaster?" And Keith's been volunteering ever since. It might be the English voice on there that no one's really heard of. But Keith did run the race a few times in the early days. So that's 2003.
So for first year, how many participants, how big was it? Who on earth signs up for a 24-hour race around Mont Blanc? I'm not going to be the guinea pig that signs up for that.
But interestingly enough, it was that week it'd been hit by a storm. So it was storms in Chamonix, and they had a lot of people sign up, and they were wondering whether it was actually going to go ahead or not. And secondly, wondering if everyone was going to finish. So they decided they were going to even give finishers medals if people made it, I think, halfway round, or even if they made it down.
So they had Courmayeur and it wasn't Trion or Valaisie, was it?
I think it was it Champay-Lac?
Yeah, that was it, Champay-Lac. The race was actually set up, you could drop out at any stage. So you had the option of either the first part, second, or going all the way around.
And they had no idea whether anyone would finish it. As a British person, you're thinking it's bank holiday weekend, Friday afternoon or Friday lunchtime, you're heading out of work and you've got 3 or 4 days in front of you. Why would you want to sign up for a race? And it was massive thunderstorms. They thought it was going to be a washout. It kind of cleared, but I think they started and finished in the rain. Dale Sherpa, Nepali guy, was the first winner.
What was his name again, Scott?
Dawan Sherpa.
Dawan Sherpa, who you met in Argentière.
I raced against him 2 weeks ago, yes, in Argentière. He's still living in and around the valley, as such, between sort of Switzerland and France, and still racing. I think he's 58 years old now. Yeah. Lovely guy. Well, he moved more like a spring chicken than I did up and down that trail race in Argentina. But it was an honour to meet him, and I think, for him, he's not really raced UTMB. I think since it was 2009, 10 maybe was the last time he raced it, but he's still doing small trail races. And he runs a foundation where you can go on trail runs in Nepal and Indonesia and other places with them, and they fund orphanages. And
so did he still seem to have an affection for UTMB? I mean, this was more of a local race.
Yeah, again, there'll always be people that UTMB's lost its edge, and for him, I think it was too big now. And I think that's similar for a lot of trail runners that run in the mountains to get away from people.
Going back to that first race, most, if not all of the participants would have been, there were people came from around the world that heard about it, but most of the people would have been local to the valleys. In Chamonix, all the volunteers were locals. Everyone, like you mentioned earlier, were supportive of the race because it was going to bring much needed tourism into an area, a part of the month when it's very quiet.
Yeah.
So back then, absolute huge support for it, and feat of endurance to run around Mont Blanc. That absolutely reflects what Chamonix is about in terms of those kind of pursuits.
And I think the stadium is obviously the massive, and the valleys and the cols that you go up and down as you circumnavigate Mont Blanc. But in some ways, that endurance sort of stadium and that long-term endurance race is familiar in France. You've got the Tour de France, you've got the Le Mans 24-hour race. So I think as a spectacle for people coming out supporting, they're used to doing that. They have a long 100-year history of supporting long endurance things. So I think for the French to take to this, firstly the people in the valley, but other people spreading out from there. Mountain people going, yeah, we're going to support this, and it was phenomenal support from the start.
Absolutely. So maybe just talk us through the growth of the race from those early days to even where it is now.
Yeah, I think the numbers, they were already getting 700 people signing up.
Yeah.
At first, it was just UTMB. There was just one race, so it was probably a 2-day thing over the weekend, starting on Friday, and most people would, by Sunday they'd be wrapping up. And the numbers and the demand and the word spread. And I think when people in the running world were hearing about it, there was obviously ultra running scene was growing everywhere. Western States that we covered in our other podcasts have been going for 25 years already by then, a bit more. The Yorkshire Three Peaks race that we discussed in our other podcast, it was already 50 years old. So there's an awful lot of people running trails and running mountains. So word spread across the world, and more people started coming, and they wanted to facilitate that. But they're also conscious of keeping the spirit of the original race alive, not having too many people. So I think they started CCC first.
Okay.
I think it was like 2008 or 2009 when CCC started, which is the 100k version. So CCC starts in Côte-Maillot, goes on to Champélac, and then finishes in Chamonix, 3 Cs. Which came next? Was it TDS?
I don't know. I think, but obviously there have been 7 or 8 races now. So that's happened quite quickly over a 10 or so year period, hasn't it?
Yeah, so if you figure out, I think they had OCC was the last, maybe not the last one to be added, but of the 3 that are the big standout ones now, it was the final one to be added. But in between they added TDS, which is a more tricky, rockier route that goes through the Savoy area, or the old Savoy area. Then they added PTL, which is the longest one, 300 and something miles. And
that's one of a feat of endurance, isn't it? It's you do it in pairs. It's 5, 6, 7 days.
Yeah, you do it in pairs. And I mean, we're going to come back to this tension a little bit between the locals and the international side of the race, and people coming in and they're chasing their dream there. But one thing Doug Meyer wrote to me, and he's done a lot of the races now, and he's done most of the races. He signed up for PTL this year, and he said it's one way of getting out of Chamonix for the week. So you can avoid Chamonix by doing PTL. You can go out with a mate and you can run around for 300 and something kilometers or 300 miles, and you can get lost in the mountains, and you can avoid the noise and the industry sort of circus that comes to town in Chamonix these days. So you've got this growth that continued. The numbers are going up. We're now getting to a stage.
The Americans would obviously connected to it really right from the beginning because of the North Face connection and the Topher connection, and amongst others, I guess. So it would have been well known right from the off in places like North America.
Yeah, and I think the Topher Gaylord connection, not just to UTMB as a sponsor, and they were happy. They were picking up athletes there because there was, I think, the most successful athlete to run UTMB, Lizzie Hawker, a British woman, was signed up. I think after she won the first time, she was signed up by North Face and came on board. And so they started signing athletes up to the North Face. But Topher had this connection and affiliation with Western States and the American running, ultra running scene. So word spread, and then Americans started coming. And the American women were more successful at first. Rory Brassio and others were running UTMB, and successfully were winning it. You had this growth, internationalization of the race. They were adding on more and more races as time went on. So by the time you got to sort of 2015, when the North Face sponsorship ended, I think you had 4 or 5 races then. So it was merging into a bit more of a full week already by then. But at the same time then, the growth of trail running was kind of like the first golden era of trail running. You had this the Unbreakable film that came out that covered Western States. The live broadcast started in 2015.
When did Kilian first race it?
I think Kilian first raced in 2011.
2011.
So he came along, and before that you had quite a few older guys that were winning, and this young brash 20-year-old came along and won it. And there was controversy with Kilian when he first came along, because it's the required kit that you've got to take on these high mountain passes and the weather through the night, and Kilian took it to a minimalism level. I think his safety blanket he'd cut down to a square no bigger than that, but it was still a safety blanket.
Charles Cagoule or something.
Yeah, I think some other team managers and runners were complaining that Kilian was carrying pretty much nothing, but I think he kept it within the rules. So he was light and fast. That's what Kilian's been throughout his career. And in contrast, I think Lizzie Hawker, when she first turned up, she didn't really know, when she first won it, she didn't really know what she was doing. She had no crew. She was strong, but she had a rucksack that was swinging around. Yeah. And I think she'd put a room key in the back.
With the big
weight
wooden,
big wooden. You go in a hotel and you get this big wooden thing on the side of the key. She'd put that in her back, in a pack, and so it was swinging around. But she still managed to win the race. And I think she streamlined going forward once No Face sort of sponsored her. And Lizzie went on to win it 5 years. But when I talked to Keith about Lizzie, and Keith spent quite a lot of time with Lizzie, he was saying, Chamonix was the last place that Lizzie would want to be. She was quite a shy character and wanted to be up in the mountains, didn't want to be down in the town. And so the last place she'd want to be would be the UTMB week, but she was attracted to a race in the mountains. Still, the person who's won the race more than anyone else.
But all these stories inspired the books, the media, and you can imagine why. I mean, I remember the first time someone told me about it. It was a guy I knew in Manchester, and he'd done the race. It must have been quite in the early years. I was speaking to about our connections to Chamonix, and he knew I loved the running. He said, "You've got to try." He was always trying to get me to do Bob Graham or Tom Rothwell, the guy. You've got to do this race around Chamonix. Me and Michelle did it, and I said, "Go on, what is it?" He says, "Well, it's you run around Mont Blanc in one go." And I'm trying to picture it. I'm just like, this doesn't make sense. Just like, explain that to me. And he said, and when we did it, the weather was horrendous. He said we were soaked, and they built these big fires at points around the mountain, and we were taking our clothes off and putting them on next to the fire to try and dry them. And I couldn't comprehend the concept of it at that point. So he might have told me about it then, but it was probably a year or two down the line before I really started to understand what it was as a race and what it looked like.
And I think for anyone who's run a marathon and they're focused on their time and their pace, those things go out the window. This is a complete jigsaw puzzle of survival and bring the right kit, keeping warm at night, keeping dry, as you said. And this is exactly what they were thinking when Renee and Michelle and Katrine pitched the race. They're like, is it possible? Is it really possible? I think there was Sherpa who'd never run further than, I think, a marathon or some kind of distance, even though he was a strong, probably ex-Sherpa. He didn't know if it was possible when they set off on that first.
So how much does the myth or the storytelling, how much does that just blow this race open? How much impact has that had on it, would you say? And has there been stages of where that's all of a sudden escalated the kind of popularism of it?
If you take the acronym UTMB, from my place in the world, where I was in Jakarta, Indonesia, and I was running volcano races, the race organisers there started calling their races UT, whatever it was, UTR, Ultra Trail Rinjani, it was the Rinjani mountain in Indonesia. UTS became Ultra Trail Snowdonia.
Yes.
Everyone started copying what was going on in Chamonix because it was like, we want to do an ultra trail race. And at that time, for me as a road runner, and for people who've come from that road running background, they were like going, well, it's just something above a marathon. You just got to hold your sort of pace for a bit longer, and you're going, oh, no. This is completely different. So I think what happened is it had this effect. People were hearing about this race or seeing it in magazines and then watching the odd film, and they were going, oh my goodness, we need to try and be a part of this, whether we need to try and get there and run there or whether we need to replicate it where we are. So people were going, hey, we're going to copy this acronym, we're going to copy this kind of style of racing, high mountain racing. And that just spread out. So I think the knock-on effect of that is more and more people wanted to come to Paradise because the unique place to run a trail race in the world, whether it's fact or fiction, but the myth is still there. To run in Chamonix means you've made it.
Yeah, so at some stage, people want to do it, they want to be there, brands want to be connected to it.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it changes from what you could say was the localized race with the culture, and it becomes a tipping point And the tipping point is maybe when the commercialism starts to get a little bit bigger.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it,
when did we notice that?
Lockdown, as we've discussed in the past, lockdown changes a lot of things. I think coming into 2018, 2019, that momentum was building, and I think the Pilettis at that stage were very aware of this change and this growth and wanted to do a little bit more. And I think even then they were talking to possible suitors for expansion and investors, even though the Ironman investment and sort of partnership with the Pilettis didn't start till 2023. I think they first started discussing it in 2021, so it was after lockdown. So I think it probably had a bit of a lull, as you did with lockdown, and some uncertainty, as most businesses would have had, of how that was going to play out. But UTMB were already sowing the seeds for sort of expansion and showing their brand beyond Chamonix, because I think if you take the Pilettis at face value, you know that Michel was a soul runner. You know, he was this guy. He's run so many ultra races around the world. He's still going out and doing.
I believe he's run over 85 ultras.
Yeah, exactly. So the guy is sort of so passionate about this and wants to keep the soul of UTMB within what it is now, which is a global enterprise. And let's be fair, it's a business. You know, they've got to make profit. They've got investors. So how do they keep the soul and keep the expansion or keep the growth measurable? But how do they keep that going forward? And that's going to attract a lot of different comments, which it does.
And they've poured the life into it for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
And even though they sold back in 2023.
So it's 23, I think, when the partnership starts. They haven't really sold in the sense of like there's been investment come in, so they're still a big part of it.
Do they still have a part ownership?
Yeah, so I think that they've still got part ownership. Their daughter, for example, is stepping up now. In some ways, it's a bit like Glastonbury. You know, you've still got this thing. You've got a bit of an ownership. There's a second generation coming on. I think the son and the daughter, I think it's Isabel is the daughter, and the son is also involved in the race now, in the race organisation and of the global sort of. I think Isabel's in charge of the French side of UTMB as it expands. But I think, you know, when you get to where we are now, and you've got sort of 2,000 volunteers coming in for UTMB week, 10,000 runners in the town. You've got 50,000 spectators coming into the town for that week, and then you've got 18. Across France, Italy and Switzerland, you've got 18 local authorities involved where the race goes through. So you've got to coordinate all of those. So anyone who's a race organizer who's got any empathy for race organizers knows how difficult it is dealing with landowners and local authorities, etc. So you can imagine the nightmare of dealing with 18 different authorities in 3 different countries to get this. The border goes right across the top of Mont Blanc, and splits off into France and Switzerland and Italy.
And when you spoke to the mayor of Chamonix, what was his kind of view on the growth and the spectators and I suppose the view of the locals on this race?
Well, the mayor of Chamonix has got like sort of three points that he kind of came out to me on, But the first point is that the race is magic. The sporting side of Chamonix, the sporting side of UTMB is a massive positive. We go again. Chamonards, the people of the valley. There's 9,000 people in Chamonix, and there's 14,000 people that live in the valley, taking the 3 or 4 other towns. On any one time, he told me there's 100,000 people visiting the valley. You know, whether you're in June, July, or back end of August when UTMB is. He said, from the sporting side of things, you know, it's magic. We love it, and I then went on, unbeknown to me, I went on to run a race 2 days later after interviewing him that he was the race organiser of. He's no longer the race organiser because he's now elected as the mayor.
I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? And that shows you the makeup and the mentality and the culture of the locals and of the place when the mayor is, you know, in his previous life as one passionate sports person, but two, an organizer of local races.
I'm glad you picked up on that because it shows. I mean, I think he ran UTMB himself in 2007 as the new mayor. So I think there's been a long-standing mayor. We're now in the end of July, going into 2026 UTMB, and he was elected in April 2026. So this new mayor, I think he's won quite well, won the election quite well in Chamonix. But he was saying it's been There's almost 10 races now. It's over 10 days. When it was 3 or 4 days, it was probably manageable. But he was saying that, even though the races are fantastic and we love the sport, there is too much and it needs to come back in some ways. And the second point that he was anxious about and wanted to make the change was all the brands that will come in now. And it was largely the activations. And I think there's a bit of a discussion you have about what is an activation. When I was first there in 22, 23, it seemed like the Wild West. There was activations left, right and centre. People, pop-up shops here, giving away free shoes. It was cramming up the centre. Everyone is doing shakeout runs. Brands were doing shakeout runs.
That's even more prominent the last year or two. I think it's gone slightly ridiculous, hasn't it, in terms of bumping into groups of runners on the local trails.
Yeah, and Monsieur Lafond, the mayor, was saying that brands are now renting out a massive percentage of the hotels and chalets and the restaurants and the bars to have their events. Now, there has been some kickback from some brands, I think, now that they want to do more sort of talk shops further out of the town, which is less visible, so it's not clogging up main areas, especially the activation runs and these pop-ups around the centre of town. And I think that's probably where he's got some common ground with the Palettis and UTMB. They'd want to push back on the non-official brands because they've got their brand sponsors, whether it's Hop.
Well, we had two locations, I won't name the brands, but we went to one of the pizza shops in the middle of town. Two nights, it was fully hired out to them. No one could come in. Then we went down to the Mountain Brewery. You couldn't get on for the full night. One of the brands had a private hired it. So these are the main places you would go on UTMB week.
And talking to Doug Mayer, and Doug's been around. He lives in the valley, and he's the kind of one of the go-to guys. But I mean, Doug was saying that even his brand, and Doug runs the Run the Alps brand, which puts on running holidays in and around Chamonix and France and Switzerland and all sides of the Alps. But he was saying they'd had something a bit further out of town, and it was a bit more of a discussion. I think they did it under Chatham House rules, so they could have a frank discussion with people within the industry about what needs to change and what are the challenges and what are the opportunities. So there are people that are actually thinking a bit more, hey, we have gone a bit too far, but it will be seen. It's yet to be seen what the mayor will actually do along with the Palettis. And I know that the mayor has met with the Palettis since being elected. I'm sure their relationships changed a little bit since he became the mayor, but they've all been around and lived in a small community for a long time. But his third point was also our visitors and spectators. Yeah. So he was saying that, we need to reduce, and he understands that if your husband or your wife is running the race, you want to come and you want to bring your kids because it's a lifetime achievement for many people. It's their dream to get there. He said, but bringing so many members of the family and bringing so many spectators, he said it's just clogging up, and it's also having a detriment effect. But he was also looking at the runners as well, and there's some sensitive conservation areas that you might think of rerouting the race through or would like to.
Interestingly, and I don't know if this is connected, but OCC this year has been, they're not taking you up to Flagey and down from Flagey. Yeah. We're running you through the Argentière Valley or that side through La Paz.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the guides company as well, they've been monitoring the environment and the routes and everything for years and years. If it pertains to mountaineering, so I think within the local authorities there, they've got a massive understanding of where's sensitive and where needs to be avoided and where needs to be rerouted, and that's happening with Western States. It's getting rerouted next year because of the wilderness area. Trail running, that's the nature of it. We're in nature. There's going to be sensitive areas that need to be avoided at certain points in time. And obviously, when you've got 10,000 people coming through 7 different races, 8 races now, then you are going to have bottlenecks and you're going to have clashes with issues with sustainability. So he was saying, if people can just come once, you don't need to come again all the time. And
well, they did know about people bringing their families, and I can relate to that. I've gone and raced there, and I mean, there's a group of 10 of us.
Yeah.
Just to support, you probably wouldn't pick UTMB week for a holiday to Chamonix, but because of the race, you'd take the family.
I think the mayor's raised some really good points, and the people I talked to around Chamonix said, I'm glad this issue's been raised. and I'm sure that the Pilates are listening. I'm sure that UTMB organisation will have frank and detailed discussions of how they can sustain the race, but also make some cutbacks in the future. I'm sure that discussion will be going on.
I think there's still youth support by the sound of it for UTMB and the activity. You know, that's not in doubt. It sounds like they're just trying to bring some common sense back into it and give some support back to the locals to feel like some of them don't even want to be there during that week.
And I think it's what he did say to me. He said, I want a reconciliation between the Chaminades and UTMB, where I think probably over 50% of people who vote for him have voiced some kind of opinion against or concerns about UTMB. And I've talked to quite a few locals, and they kind of echoed his sentiments. But the wider subject that we talked about, the wider mountain town, you know, he was talking about he wants to build a park and ride and a bigger welcome centre that's keeping people sort of out in the centre of town, but they can absorb a lot around the town. So he's got some other ideas, and he was also saying that, you know, it's not the only mountain sport in town. You know, we want to protect our heritage of the pioneers of the mountains from going forward. And he's going to, I think, rehab the ice hockey rink, which for me, probably the most local sport. If you go and watch ice hockey in Chamonix, you go and watch the Pioneers, the ice hockey team, the Mont Blanc Chamonix Pioneers. It's so local when you go in that stadium. Like you've got hardly any visitors there. I felt like, oh my goodness, I'm the only foreigner in this.
Yeah, I think it was one of those memorable nights I had there about 15 years ago. And it was just a great night, and it felt very local.
So I think the point is that there's more going on in Chamonix than just trail running. You know, trail running for us, we're so serious about it because it's our sport, our love. But there's other sports, and for a politician and for locals, they've got other things, wider issues to consider. And tourism is obviously their main sort of sector, and they want to try and grow another sector. And he talked to me a little bit about other sectors he could try and grow.
I think there's one point I want to raise actually that really seemed to surprise you during the research as well. It was an incredible amount of other activities going on in Chamonix while you were there, for example, the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think going in the middle of July, I mean, someone was saying to me that the Marathon de Mont Blanc, which is the end 2 weeks early, the end of June, was actually a busier weekend than UTMB. So that's so he was saying
that must have grown then, because it always felt a little quieter. It's certainly for the spectator side, you know.
And I'm only judging by being on the campsite where I visit and stay on UTMB. When I arrived, there was the World Climbing Tour was in Chamonix. A couple of thousand people in the centre of town watching the speed climbing, going up the walls with the mountain backdrop. It was amazing. It was on Eurosport Live. That's the busiest weekend I've ever been in Chamonix. It was busier then than I think UTMB was, even though the concentration wasn't sort of as much as it is in UTMB when it's all focused on that. But I think, in some ways there's more to life than trail running. And for Chamonixards or for outdoor people going to Chamonix, I felt like I was in a minority of trailers on the
festival in the mountain.
There was a jazz festival up in the mountain, and you can go up and watch at 2,000 meters. You can watch jazz bands playing. There's so many people doing the TMB, so they're getting out there. They're doing their TMB. They're doing their loop of Mont Blanc in 10 days hike. There's thousands of people doing that week in, week out. They're dominated. And then you've got so many climbers that are on the campsite and around town as well. So Chamonix is not just about trail running. It is for certain periods of that summer, but that's what it was. But the one thing that's interesting, I think, coming out of the conversations with all the people around it is that going back to the live broadcast now is basically watched by about 1 million people, the UTMB race. That is one massive marketing advert for Chamonix. The pictures quality are getting better every year. There are better cameras, better cyclists and camera runners, etc., drones, everything. And it looks amazing. So if you've got 1 million eyes watching that, and a lot of them might be friends of runners, they might not be trail runners themselves, but they're going, wow, that place is amazing, I want to go there. Yeah. So they're at breaking point in some ways. In Chamonix, it's a breaking point. I mean, there's still trains around Chamonix. New places being renovated and built, but they are at that saturation point, not just in UTMB week, but in other weeks of the year. Prices are going up because there's only so many rooms in the town.
Yeah, and I think that's the chasing paradise. People see it and they think, I've got to be there. I want to be there. I mean, Instagram, you know, it's so popularized towards all the great bits of these places and these events.
And if you think last year we went back and we went to Chamonix for the week, none of us were racing, were we? None of us were racing. We went with media passes, we covered the race, we did bits and bats around the race. And a lot of people who we were trying to get interviews with were saying, why don't you come back early next year? Come to Chamonix, come around July time when it's a bit easier and a bit quieter. We've got more time to meet you, or we've got more time to have a better conversation. So that's kind of what we did this year. I went back, I went out for 2 weeks. And even then it's difficult. I mean, I still didn't get an interview with a representative of UTMB himself, even though they're open to discussing, probably not in person, some of the points that we're discussing now. But those conversations are going to go on anyway. And I think just bringing it back, the growth of UTMB comes to a head after lockdown. The pledges are having these discussions, and then Ironman comes in. There were various suitors, and Doug May covers it well in his book. Spartan, is it Spartan?
Okay.
So I think it was Spartan came in, and Michel Poletti was quite clear that their values don't align with us. I think they have this commando attitude to conquering, and it wasn't a trail running solo sport of what they wanted. But Ironman seemed to have that partnership. So Ironman have come in, and that's really seen the growth of the UTMB World Series, and it's only really happened in the last 3 years, really. So,
and this is why the UTMB dream has turned into a global event. I think we'll come back to that Ironman relationship and how that's panned out a little bit towards the end. But,
sure.
There's been a 3-4 year period now since Ironman invested in UTMB, and so you've got a bit of a time to see how that's kind of worked out.
And if we can just put some numbers onto what that growth looks like now, I mean, just in the last sort of month or two, they've acquired a new British race. So there's now 3 UTMB races in Britain. So there's the Ring of Steel race in Scotland that's going to start in 27. There's the UTS in Wales and Snowdonia, and then there's the Arc of Attrition in January. But mirroring that across the globe, as we said, there's 55, I think it's going up to in the 60s, because there's some that are pending to start next year. But let's say at the moment there's about 55 UTMB World Series events in 28 countries around the world. And there's 60 plus events that have been announced. There's an extra 5 or 6 coming. And there's 266 individual races within that. 5 continents, totaling about almost 150,000 runners a year compete in UTMB branded races of some sort. And apparently 69% of the world's elite trail runners compete in at least one World Series event during each year. And then there's loads of other stats that you can kind of go through. We'll put those in the show notes, and we'll go through the massive growth of this since Ironman came on board. There's now 13 events that are live broadcast, so not just the UTMB one. There's 13 events that are live broadcast on YouTube, on their platforms. 31 races are live streamed. So they've got 23 million views now across the whole UTMB world.
I think you take away people's opinions, whether they are good or bad or indifferent. It's an incredible organisation in terms of its scale and its accessibility to trail running in some of the, some places in the world. I mean, I've personally been to some places I would never have been to. I discovered the Pyrenees through a UTMB race, of which I'll 100% be going back to spend holiday time in the Pyrenees in the future.
And I think, you've touched on that. It's an interesting point, because when they strategically build these races, and the calendar deliberately spans iconic locations around the world. So it's destination running. People want to go to, I've always wanted to visit Patagonia, but I can go do a UTMB race there. Or, there's Latvia and other places. So the Dolomites, Blue Mountain, the Japanese Alps. You might think, wow, I can go do a UTMB race in Japanese Alps. And it might get you more stones, possibly to end up, because all roads still lead back to Chamonix, which is
that's the idea, isn't it?
The idea is Chamonix is the number one destination in the world for trail runners. But you've got all these destinations. They're purposely choosing them. I think the Ring of Steel race that they've selected in Scotland, Kilian's won that race. When it was back, it's one of the most technical, sort of difficult sort of mountain races going, and it's got this brutal sort of reputation, and they've taken that on. These are all destinations that you might want to, and if you were in the mountain running world, you might get it, or you might understand some of these places, but I think as a lens to learning about the world, and as an internationalist, someone who's lived in various different countries and worked around the world and worked with different people, I think the international side of connecting people in UTMB is absolutely phenomenal. I think when you're in Chamonix, no matter what the critics are, when you've got that spirit of the finish line, there's people from all over the world and they're all connecting over the
And you know what?
Powerful.
They do it well. You know, going up into to Val d'Aran, to Andorra, and some of these places, the way that they put on the event, the excitement they build around it, the celebration when you finish, you know, it's completely different to what many people want to do in a sport. But you know, we spoke about this so many times. How we love going to a £5 fell race where you turn up, you enter on the day. There's no nonsense. You run up and down. You have some coffee and cake and a beer, a bit of a crack, and then you go home. There's a place for that. I also think there's a place for this, and you know, some of the enjoyment and the weekends we've had from this have been fantastic weekends and experiences. So it's different, and it's not for everyone, but there's definitely a place for it.
Yeah, and I think I interviewed Jean Brown, who's a member of my running club, but I think she was top 20 at UTMB in 2016, and Jean's like a traditional fell runner, you know. I think when I interviewed her, she'd just run Lostdale, so she loves that £10 turn up, pay on the day, £5 bit of cake and a brew afterwards. And lucky, Jean's not bling bling at all, and she was like saying, but there's something about the magic in the mountains when you're running around Chamonix, also you're running around Mont Blanc, that kept bringing her back, and she's done most of the races, and she's an exceptional runner. Is Jean, and I think it was great to interview her and sort of the contrast even from 2016 till now. But she was saying the atmosphere and the support then, there was some magic to that, which you don't always get at a fell race. You know, you're kind of out there on your own. It's camaraderie with the 4 or 5 people or whatever you're racing with, you know, and the laugh that you're having at the end, which kind of gets a bit lost in Chamonix because it's also noisy at the end. You know, you magnetise towards your friends and family, not necessarily the people you were running against. They get lost in the crowd. But I think there is something in that spirit that is there that keeps bringing you back.
And we'll come on to that in the next section as we kind of work out what are people actually chasing, the pilgrimage, and ultimately what's it like to be part of the Super Bowl of trail running. So you've done the work, you've done the training, you've managed to get in the race, and you're heading out to the UTMB week. What's the atmosphere like? What's the emotion like? How does a week pan out?
Well, I've never qualified, so I've not actually done all the work myself. I go as a fan, but I know exactly what you mean. I guess generally it has morphed into a week, isn't it? I think the first race starts on a Monday, and if you're running PTL, and then TDS starts on a Tuesday. OCC's Thursday. In between that, I think Tuesday you've got the one over in Courtmail race, which is the shorter 17k race over in Courtmail. So you've got that race over there. For me, it generally starts at Geneva Airport. You'll land on Sunday or Monday, or
I really like that weekend before, if you're lucky enough to get there. Then
so you can get at work on the Friday before,
so
you're then going to be there Friday for like 10 days. You leave on the Monday after, 10 days late on a Monday.
It's a great, like you say, you arrive at Geneva, you spot a few runners travelling light, wearing the trail shoes, not packing a lot of weight probably. You just get that feeling straight away that you're on your way to Chamonix, and
you meet people on the bus, don't you, or in the airport. And we bumped into people hiring car last time, and
we met the Norda guys.
We met the Norda guys, Nick and Willa from Norda, and then this time I bumped into trail runners who organise a race, who've taught me into running a race. Over in Lancashire in the next 2 weeks, and I met them on the bus.
Straight away you're into it.
And sometimes the brands are all over it. I mean, one week arriving there, I got a big goodie bag from a brand on a sort of private, charter bus hire. I was like, wow.
So the excitement starts.
It starts.
And you're on your way into Chamonix.
You feel like you're merging into a mass of people who are your people, because they're all trail runners and they're all there for the same reason.
And you can't wait to get there and to get into town, can you? So you're into town, and it's very much the same feeling. You're blown away yet again by the sensational scenery and the views. It's just a really nice feeling to be in Chamonix that weekend before, when that excitement and that build is starting. The expo's not even started till being built till the Monday.
I'm even taking photos on the bus on the way in, even though you know how bad they're going to be with the reflection from the glass approaching the mountains are approaching. You're still like, oh my goodness! And you know they're not going to be great photos, but the buzz is building, isn't it, all the time?
And I think that just happens gradually then over the coming 7 days as it leads up to the main event, which is the beginning of the UTMB race. Which also, in a sense, marks the end of the weekend, because that's the final race starting. The expo's dropped. People are out there supporting the runners and their teams.
I think Hoka, the main sponsor, they have for the last few years, they've been having a sort of invite-only party in just near Notre-Dame-les-Gauges. You know, they have a private sealed-off area. All the Hoka staff move out there. They've been working on the Expo. A friend of mine from the UK works on the Expo. He's worked in Valderrama for Hoka. He travels the world with Hoka, working for them on Expos. And they all abandon the village in the race village in town, and they all move out there and have a big party. So that week all pans out over there. But as a runner, I mean, you've run a couple of races there. The vibe must be different. I'm going as a fan. So I'm like, well, I can go for a beer, I can eat as much ham and cheese as I want, or whatever I want to do for the week. I can kind of do it. I'm not on a race vibe, I'm not on a taper. And there's all these exciting runs you can go out on, and you can go and meet people. I can just hang out and relax and be a fanboy, which is what I am.
I think the worst part of actually running it is you land in Chamonix. The first thing you want to do is go running in the mountains, and because you're in taper time, you're very limited to what you can do. So it's almost like a waste of your visit at that early stage of the week. You're desperate to get out there.
I can't remember which podcast it was. One of the American podcasts I was listening to about UTMB, and they put this down for one of the reasons why no American men had actually worked for so long, because they'd said that people arrive if they're a top elite runner 2 or 3 weeks later, and you're looking up and you're going, I just want to go running. So their taper is, they don't taper, and they just go out every day and do too much, and they burn out before the race even starts, which everyone's guilty of,
Yeah, and I think if you're running, it's a waiting game. You've got to make sure you don't drink too much Mont Blanc beer. Just get through to the start of the race without getting injured and trying to get your sleep. And
the little berries that you pick, the little wild berries. The beer with those little berries, it's top notch. That Brasserie de Mont Blanc with those little berries, what you call them, the sort of like little blackberries you can pick and eat.
And that'll be a strong beer, no doubt.
So anyway, we digress. But basically, all the attractions and all the trappings are there, and you, as a runner, have got to wrap yourself in cotton wool because you've trained so damn hard for this, and you're ready to go Friday morning at CCC or Friday evening at UTMB. Basically, you've got to avoid everyone.
And I think whether you're racing or not, it's good to get up and into the mountains, but also start to watch some of the races. I mean, you've got, if you do follow the sport and you kind of know what's going on at the top end of the fields, you've got some of the best female and male runners in the world, and the access you can get to them, the locations you can get to watch them coming through what might be difficult climbs, so you can get a real understanding of how the elites run and what it looks like and what it feels like. And, to me, there's a lot of things you can do just there on holiday as a spectator that make it an incredibly enjoyable experience. And if you're running, then you just want to get going and, you get your reward when you get out on the trails and hopefully have a good day.
Yeah. As a fan, I mean, my week is, apart from the, obviously, drinking a bit too much beer or eating too much baguettes, then I really enjoy OCC, because OCC sort of starts in the morning and finishes by just after lunchtime. As a fan, you can, without watching telly, you might have the live feed on your phone, but you can actually get out there and go 2 or 3 points in the race and still be back maybe at the finish line. So you can actually follow sort of certain runners. You can actually get out there and be a right fanboy for that day. It takes a bit of logistics getting round, but you can kind of still do it, even maybe just going on the bus or the train up and down the valley. You might not go over to Switzerland on that side to see the start in Osiers or that first climb. I found that that's great. The frustrating bit but also the rewarding side of watching UTMB, the race. Definitely go to Notre Dame de Gorge because they, as we said earlier, you go up Notre Dame, it's just gone dark. They're 30 miles in, starting the first main climb of the sort of UTMB lap. And it's just wild. It's absolutely wild. People going berserk. They've got the chainsaws with the chain off and they're revving the motors and there's flares and fireworks going off. And we'll post some images up. I'm sure you can see.
So this is more like the Tour de France kind of atmosphere, isn't it?
And basically, I think there's a couple of fan groups and they called like a flash mob about 2 or 3 years ago. That they called it out on Facebook and they put this on there and it wasn't Notre Dame de Gorge, I think that's been happening for years, but there was another point on day 2, sort of coming back into sort of the French side through Switzerland. Last year it was Valorcine and they were up from there, but I think what actually happened last year, what I was explaining, I think this was by Doug Mayer, that UTMB said, hey, listen, we're getting too many people going out. Let's organise a proper fan zone for this. And they had this fan zone. Tom Evans won the race from GB, and there's quite a lot of pictures of Tom going through that area. And I think he was quite clear he was going to win by it, and he was really enjoying the scene. And there's thousands of people out there, sort of just like a Tour de France scene. And it's during the day, so you can see it more visually. I think the previous year they'd done it on their own, so it was becoming lack of control. But going back to what the mayor was saying and condensing people into better areas, this might be one option going forward, that they might have designated fan zones where people can go and watch and create as much atmosphere. The Alderweireld Tour de France scenes that we saw just about a week ago, 2026 Tour de France, 2 days of Alderweireld, even the Tour de France organisers now saying there was so many people now, they might ticket it. Not for money, but for access, because they want to limit the amount of people because it can get too much in the way of the runners or the riders. So I think the popularity is getting so much. So that might be a solution going forward. You might see more fan zones, which you can then go in if you want the hype and the atmosphere, and people draw these big photo heads of famous runners. Fantastic thing to enjoy a day. But if you are going out to cruise somebody, it's a different kettle of fish, especially for UTMB, because there are limited cruise access. So you can only have one person going the aid station. You should be going around, if you're not a top elite, you should be going around on one of the buses that provide for cruise. All props to anyone who cruises in UTMB. That's a long 24, 36 hours for you to get around 3 countries on buses with all the stuff that you need to take for your runner. Exhausting. Probably not as exhausting as running it, but the next best thing of exhaustion. So people are going out there for different reasons, and if you are going out for crew, it is an experience to do that for someone. And they'll probably crew you when you want to do the race.
And I think also just going into back into the town.
Yeah.
So you've got the setting up of the start line and the finish line, the famous stretch.
Into the church.
Yeah, and it's actually quite quiet, isn't it, as well? It's not busy all the time. In the week leading up to it, for example, in the evenings, it's quite quiet about town. It's the condensing of the people for the start and the ending of certain races where it really gets busy.
Yeah, it's just off the main street, and the mayor's office is right on the finish line. So I interviewed the mayor about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I thought I was the last person to see him maybe of the day. But the day before, when I'd gone in to see the mayor to book an appointment, right on the finish line there's now 2 brands that have got shops on there that are opening up right on the finish line. A storm came in, and I'll put the video footage somewhere on here, hopefully. In the middle of July, the plant pots in there, the office were blown off. The seats were getting blown across in front of the church from the cafes on both sides of the little square there. Absolutely crazy weather. And I was just the only person out there trying to get some footage of this amazing scene. And it kind of reminds me that could be you on the start line. You could get a storm come through there.
Really interesting point, because I think the build-up as well, especially as a spectator, as a runner, but also as someone you're going on holiday, you want nice weather. But when you're running, there is a lot of thought into what the conditions are going to be like. You kind of prep for hot weather, and that's what you typically would expect. But you can have really miserable weather there typically it's not all week. It might be in stop and starts, but there's snow as well on some of the high grounds. It isn't kind of usually uncommon, isn't it?
So I mean, Tom Evans, who we've chatted to a little bit, but Tom after last year's race was quite clear that we knew it was going to be. It was a wet night. I was in Contamines. I didn't go down to Notre Dame Gorge. It was just too wet, and people were putting on their cags, their waterproofs. Some of them earlier than others, and it was interesting going out of Contamines who had their jackets on. Ludo had his jacket on really early. Courtney didn't. Did Courtney finish? Or she didn't win it. But Tom said that going up that first pass up there at the top, you're going in the middle of the night, and he buddied up with, I think, Bendyman and someone else. The three of them buddied up just to check in on each other. The weather was so bad going over the coals that night, and I think Tom was saying, being an ex-army officer and going out on these long hikes in bad conditions, I was used to it. So we all buddied up and we got ourselves through this section. So if you don't take 2 pairs of gloves, etc. So you've got all those things to think about. Even in August, it's going to be snowing at some point. Or it's going to you might get a lucky year where you get no rain or no snow, but you've got to be prepared for that.
Talk to me about the emotion of the people and the atmosphere, especially on that UTMB start evening.
Tense.
As a spectator, when there's a familiar spot we've been to 2 or 3 times, and I always find really interesting is watching the competitors walk into that start line and just looking at the faces. Yeah. Some of them look excited, but I've seen people they look absolutely kind of almost petrified, and just an awareness of what they're about to undertake.
I think you've got two components to this. You've got the elite. And I think the elite are going to get shepherded in there, but they're in the zone. A lot of them are in the zone. Some of them are just quite happy and jokey, and they're not, the older ones maybe a bit more Ludo or someone. I think Killian's quite relaxed, but a lot of them are in the zone. So there's like, don't look at me, don't disturb me, I'm in the zone. They're focused. But for the middle of the pack, back of the pack, you've got 3,000 people in that little crammed area. You've got to get there. You might be staying somewhere out of town. Okay, it's a 6 p.m. start.
Yeah, it's a long day waiting for that start.
And you're stressed. You might, to get to the toilet, you might miss your spot. And then it's a really narrow sort of start. It's really packed. People do fall over in that start bit, going out of Chamonix on that road, heading out towards La Houche. It's a stressful period, I think. When I put myself in the race, generally I'm thinking, I talk more to people after the race than I do before the race. You kind of end up, even people you're kind of lining them up a bit. And so, what it's like. You're thinking, well, is he going to beat me again today or is he not? So you've got that race tension, which I think we all kind of get. And it might be about, have I got the right gear? Whatever your stress is, you might not have slept. You might want to go to the toilet, etc., etc. So I just think it's a place of stress. Most start lines are, and it's hiked up, and then the music comes on. Conquest of Paradise, Vangelis comes on, builds up the atmosphere. And I think for a lot of people, and it maybe comes out more at the end, but it also comes out at the start, you've made it. It's a poignant moment for most people because they've made it. They made it to start line. That in itself is a massive achievement. Whatever goes next is probably in the lap of the mountain gods.
Yeah, and I mean, the start is incredible. The atmosphere, love it or hate it, it is an atmosphere on a different level to anything else I've been to, and it's different from any other sporting events. I think also the experience is the race sets off, and then potentially within an hour or so, the winner or the leader of the CCC is coming into town.
Yeah.
So by this time, crowds have been whipped up to a frenzy.
Yeah.
Everyone's settled down, had another drink, and then you start to hear the rumours. The first leader's going to come into town, and they come right through the centre of town, just down the street. Everyone opens up for them.
Yeah.
The atmosphere builds again, and there's a great celebration. And that celebration of runners, it doesn't stop. It continues from Thursday and before, when the LCCs are coming in, all the way through till Sunday evening.
Yeah, because I think Wednesday night TDS winners come here. I think
there's a great deal of respect from everyone in town for any runner that's coming through. They get a lot of vocal support.
Yeah.
I asked my 8-year-old daughter this morning, what does Chamonix mean to you? To her, she's been mainly the races, watching the race.
She ran all the races.
She did.
Yeah,
she ran the kids' race.
So there's the kids' race up the back on the sports field at the back.
Yeah, on the ski slope there. you look at the children, it's a full family affair, because the children from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and us, the runner runs past. You want to get, you want to get a hand slap, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
And you support people in, and there's something there's such a good feeling about standing there and watching people fulfil their dreams and knowing the effort that they've probably put into that event, into that race.
So your daughter's maybe the next Courtney, or the next Killian is watching out there that afternoon.
Well, I said, how does it make you feel? And she said, it makes me want to run.
Job done. Yeah, job done. So I think, wrapping up the week, it's obviously once the final UTMB finishes coming on the Sunday, everything kind of closes down. I think they usually have a market sale on that day, and then all the locals are trying to close down the campsites and the hotels. They want the season to finish. But I think one of the most amazing things for me as a fan and seeing that emotion and seeing that togetherness is obviously it's great to watch who wins the men's race and the women's race and the elites at the front, and you can never quite predict what's going to happen, and it's very difficult to pick winners, but they're all winners. And the medium back end and the happy hour, also the golden hour with the cut-off, and Catherine Pelletti and Michelle Pelletti will no doubt be down there. And the hugs and the emotion of those people finishing that race, because they've all been on a massive adventure. And I think this is one reason why we love trail running. You want to have an adventure in the mountains, and UTMB is going to give you that. I was out there taking some film and footage and photos last year, and you just see the emotion on those people's faces. And just to be amongst that is a privilege. And to see that sort of human endeavour of having conquered that full lap, and made it around the paradise. And I think paradise then becomes that process of what you've achieved. You've pushed yourself to the limit, and you see that more than anything in that last 3 or 4 or 5 hours as people come in and run in with their children and family and etc. Yeah.
And then it's finished for another year, and most people will be out of there on the Sunday or Monday.
Back at work.
Town could become very, very quiet at a different place. The smart people might book the holiday for after it so that they can stay in a more peaceful kind of surrounding and enjoy the Alps in a different way.
I have stayed around till like the 10th and 15th. I think one year I did TMB and I kind of set off at UTMB week and came back 10 days later. The family on the campsite, who run the campsite, a lovely family, and they were like, "Oh, come on, you guys need to go. We want to go travelling ourselves. We've got a sort of 30-day hike plan somewhere across Europe." And a lot of the people that live and work there are outdoors people. They're waiting for you to leave so they can go on their adventure. But yeah, it kind of closes down after that, and the stories that are what remain.
So we've experienced the dream and the week. But has success changed it? And I think next we'll kind of explore, has paradise changed?
Let's do it.
So has UTMB been a victim of its own success?
Yes and no. It's had its detractors. We're talking pretty much post the Ironman takeover, where a lot of people have gone online and criticised UTMB for selling out. And I think one poignant thing that comes from my time in Sham and talking to people, and Doug was quite clear on this, that a lot of people that are online or a lot of people that are out there criticising, it's easy to criticise the takeover, it's easy to criticise an acquisition or a merger. And I think this is what prompted Doug to write his great book on this, is that a lot of people don't really understand the organisation. It's a lot more nuanced. Definitely the soul of trail running is still alive through the Pellettis, and they are open to change, and they've changed quite a lot, and they're open to criticism. I've always had this thing that they do seem to listen well to criticisms, whether that's from the pro athletes on equality, or whether it's on drug testing, or whether it's on kit and or whether it's on prize money. The professional athletes are now quite well organised, and they have a conversation going on. They've brought on insiders like Hilary Girardi that have worked on sustainability with UTMB. They bring on insiders that people have voiced things against them to work with them on bringing things forward. So I think that's a really good nuance that's often lost in just online criticisms. And I've sometimes felt, oh, it seems a bit sort of, it doesn't sit well with me, but I think the benefits outweigh the costs when you look at how much emotion it brings and how much it means to so many people around the world. And they've also contributed, I think, to the growth of the sport.
Yeah, there's a lot of initiatives that they contribute to in charities and sports, and they've created the adaptive team as well, which is growing every year.
Yeah, and I don't think in any way, sense, or form they claim that they're perfect.
No, and I suppose it's how do you control success?
Yeah,
you know, when everybody wants to be part of it, and the brands are clambering over themselves, trying to support it, but trying to be attached to it, trying to contribute revenue towards it. Yeah. They're a commercial organisation. How do you control that success and stop it being detrimental to the culture of the event?
Yeah, and I think when we're touching on brands of there's obviously sponsor brands, sponsors of UTMB, and there was the Dacia car thing that they've withdrawn them from being the headline sponsor, and that was on criticism of, I think, started by the Green Runners in the UK, Damien Hall and the group there. So they've listened, they've pushed things back. There's a sustainability lobbying, but I think generally, because trail running has grown so much as a commercial enterprise for brands over the years, year on year, there's enough room for everyone. And so I think Chamonix and the week in Chamonix gives a platform for everyone to meet up. And I think a lot of that has gone over the top with activations, too many group runs too. Yeah. But I think deals are getting made in Chamonix. Might be room for a better conference, maybe at some point earlier in the season or later in the season, maybe a conference after UTMB where people in the industry can actually meet and talk about the issues. Yeah. Those sort of things are kind of going on. I went to one last year, which was on sports science, and all the people in sports science all met in Chamonix 3 or 4 days before the race. Interesting stuff.
Was it brand supported?
Definitely brand supported. There are 3 or 4 brands supported, but all the brands are there. They're the ones who are putting money into the industry to keep it going. So I think everyone is rising with it, and UTMB is allowing. I think this year there's a British race company that we know that they're tipping up at the Expo and they're advertising their races trail races in the Alps. And UTMB are fine with that. You come on, pay the money at the Expo. There's enough room for us all. It's growing so much that UTMB don't want to handle everything, even though they're growing massively.
Has it become, or did it become cool to knock UTMB?
Oh, it's easy to diss someone, isn't it? It's easy to diss someone without having nuance, and it's a tweet, isn't it? Or it's a short little text on the comments under the YouTube video. Easy to do that, but if you want to have a nuanced conversation about the organisation and the sport and the wider ecosystem, then I think, like Doug's done, you've got to kind of live there, build trust and build relationships. And I couldn't understand why UTMB didn't have time to talk to me while I was there. But people like Doug have been there for years. They're trusted. They built that trust with personal relationships. So I think there's a lot of good will. I think there's an awful lot of room for change. I think there's an awful lot of will to change. But it is what it is. And I think UTMB has helped other organisations just by growing the interest in trail running. Once you got that interest in 2006 or whenever it was, what was the first trail race you went out and did afterwards?
Yeah, the Matterhorn and
locally. Did you go off and do a local race
here in the UK?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't remember that far back, Scott.
But I think generally, if you stumbled across UTMB live stream on YouTube, you had no idea what was going on, you thought that looks fun, I want to have a go. You would find out if there was a local trail race in your area and you'd sign up. You wouldn't probably sign up for UTMB straight away. It's quite impossible.
It would inspire you to check out other trail races and things like that. And I think there are always detractors, aren't there? I think we go back to Rennie Bachelard.
Well done.
Who set up UTMB with Michelle and Catherine. And he's very much a local in Chamonix now. His view is that trail running has brought so much to Chamonix. And Chamonix is still a mountain town, but there are a lot of people that still come for skiing and climbing. But there's always going to be people that don't like change. And change can be progress. Someone's memories of what a place was look like. It's always going to be different. But what it's actually done for Chamonix is incredible, and it is legendary, like he said, the pursuit of running around the Mont Blanc for 24, 48 hours or 7 or 8, 10 days on the Tour de Mont Blanc.
Yeah, and I think when you look at what Doug's done, and Doug started this organisation called Run the Alps, and over my trip, the last 2 weeks, I ran with a couple of people who actually on Run the Alps, self-supported runs. Some of them had not even heard of some of the big races, but they'd been to a couple of trail running races. They thought this was a holiday, and it definitely was a destination. What I'm trying to say is there's enough room for trail running across the Alps, whether that's in Switzerland, France, in the Chamonix Valley or beyond, to discover trail running and have a great time. And if all you want to do is get out there and run, have a bit of time on your own, away from the troubles of the world, in a beautiful place, struggle up the hills, power hike up and try and get down some smooth single track on the way down, you don't have to race. If you want to race, there's different races to UTMB, and UTMB will be fine with that. If you want to pursue that paradise and get to UTMB over 2 or 3 years, collect the stones, we haven't talked about that much, but there's a whole process to get in. We'll put it in the show notes. It's quite complicated, but you've got to commit. But if that's all you want to do is run on great trails in a great location, there are hundreds of different ways you can do that. And I'm sure brands are happy with that, because you're going to buy the stuff. You're going to buy the poles, you're going to buy the backpack, you're going to buy whatever you need, the shoes, and you're going to contribute to that ecosystem of trail running.
And I think you've got to remember as well, is if you know the valley, if you know Chamonix, you're only ever 10, 15 minutes away from solitude.
Yeah.
No matter how busy the town is,
yeah.
It's so accessible to get into the trails. The craziness isn't everywhere.
Yeah.
And once you start to learn how to navigate into areas that aren't as well populated, even some of the local trails, and it's just like anywhere else in the Alps.
Just a plug for Run the Alps, but Doug's got a book on trail running in France and in the Alps and in Swiss Alps, and there are other guidebooks as well on trail running in the Alps. And there's some really easy runs to do, which you can think, well, I'm going to have a big day today. So the other day I went up Mont Bouet, which is back in the Victorian time was known as the ladies' Mont Blanc, because the ladies would do that while the men. So it's 3,050.
Yeah, stunning mountain.
It's on the other side. It's on the Brabant side. It's on that side. You can hike up there. It's not too much difficult, but it's a big day. You're gaining 1,200 meters over the day. The next day I took this really easy trail, sort of through forests, not too much elevation. It's all out there. It's all kind of mapped out. The trails are easy to navigate. So, and if that feeds your beast to then want to progress to UTMB, and I'm now thinking maybe I'm going to try and start collecting some stones, because I've been happy to just be a fan and admire the passion of UTMB from as a fan, but I'm thinking of having a go in the next few years. It's kind of, I think you can't be on this planet as a trail runner and not have had
it's really strange.
Not stood on one of those start lines and we cross the finish line.
Because even being such a keen trail runner for all these years, you don't have to do UTMB. You don't have to do the 24-hour race.
No.
And it's different distances for everybody.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't. I don't think you should feel that you have to do them. But there always is that feeling of I wonder what it's like, because until you've done it, it's impossible to know what the experience is like.
And I think there's always that we are endurance freaks. We do want to push ourselves. We want to know what we're capable of. And I think your challenges kind of ebb and flow. Some people are on full gas all the time. They want to hit. The next challenge is going to be more difficult. And I kind of go up and down year on year. This year I'm doing English Fell Champs races. Probably spend £100 in total in race entries over six races, and I'm going to have to triple, quadruple, times 10 that to get on UTMB train. But that passion is worth it. The magic of running in those places is a different kind of magic from doing the grassroots stuff. But they're both there in the same sort of symbiosis.
And it'll bring you a different experience, and it is, like we said, it's a Super Bowl of trail running.
Yeah.
It means that you'll be standing on the line, regardless of which race you take part in, with some of the best trail runners in the world. And what other sport can you do that and take part in the same challenge on the same day at the same time? And that's what this race brings you.
With the investment for Ironman, I mean, I was one of the first to criticise, and I was like, my gut feeling, initial reactions. But with that, you've got 30 plus new World Series events, all these locations that I can choose to go and get stones in. whether that's a new race in Scotland, or I want to go out to Lithuania, or I want to go out to Thailand, where I lived in Asia for years, visit friends out there. The options are amazing to collect those stones, or do the Valderrama that you did was fantastic. There's so many good races. So Ironman's given that potential to enhance the possibilities there.
So to summarise, has Paradise changed? Has UTMB changed? Or is it still the same attraction to people that it always has been?
Well, the numbers show that it's still a massive attraction. The Paradise of running in Chamonix or running a UTMB race, the numbers are going up. Looking at it a little bit more subjectively, personally, the Chamonix Valley is obviously undergoing some challenges. I'm sure they'll be happy that the mayor has raised these issues, and I'm sure the players will be having discussions, and there'll be a conversation of how they get a balance of what he's raised and going forward. But it's still Paradise. It's still a beautiful place with a magic feel that people will want to run in those mountains, and they'll want to challenge himself in one of those races. I don't think it's changed all that much. When you strip it back down and you look at the skin of what's going on there, it's still pretty much the same as it was 20 years ago. Climate change is obviously massive. The sustainability thing, we've seen obviously the glaciers receding. All those challenges are being taken on board, and that's going to continue to challenge the adaptation of the guides and of UTMB as they move forward. But the feeling for me hasn't changed, and I think that's what people tap into.
And I still think it can be for runners that haven't taken part in the event, or even visited the valley, the Chamonix Valley.
Yeah,
I think that absolutely this is still Paradise.
Yeah,
and this is a destination and a journey. That's what we're going to move on to next. Is what is Paradise, and does Paradise actually exist?
Yeah.
So we talked about chasing Paradise. We talked about, is UTMB Paradise? Is Chamonix Paradise? I suppose the question is it a place? Is it a feeling? Or is it something else?
It's everything all wrapped up. Hopefully the listeners have got a good idea of what UTMB and what Chamonix is about, and what it's meant to us, and what hopefully it will mean to many different people. The initial thing is like you walk in there and you're like, oh my God, this place is Paradise. It's a physical place that you can't help but fall in love with. And as one guy said to me, he keeps falling in love every time he comes back. He falls in love with the place. But as an ultra runner, process is key. It can be part of the UTMB process, but if you've been training and qualifying to get Chamonix to race UTMB or one of the other races for a process, maybe a year, maybe 2 years or 3 years, you finally get there. That process is Paradise, especially when you're on that start line, and then if you cross the finish line, that is a Paradise experience for a trail runner to be at the pinnacle of the sport, no matter what your time is or where you're finishing. But as you said, there's a feeling there as well. There's like some kind of feeling of, as Gene Brown said to me, there's a magic in the air in there, and I felt it some other places on the planet as well, where I've run. I felt a magic in there.
And it makes you feel like you belong there.
Yeah. I felt a magic in the Grand Canyon when I ran there. There's a magic to that place. And there's something magical about Chamonix as well, and the whole valley and running around there, that even if you're not part of the race, and I just go and run trails there. And I've run OCC, I think, pretty much on my own and in different sections, and I've run the routes, and you can kind of imagine you're part of the race. And you don't have to necessarily be in the race to feel that magic, to feel that Paradise trail running feeling.
And sometimes it's the experience that's hard to describe.
Yeah.
It's hard to show through a photo. For me, I think it's the journey.
Yeah.
The Paradise it's the inspiration for all your efforts.
Yeah.
So it might be a moment. It might be a memory.
Yeah.
I think for those yet to discover it, it can still be a Paradise.
Yeah.
And for those that have been there before, it may be something different to them. For me, it's simply Chamonix. And UTMB just happens to be there.
Well, if we go back to the inspiration for trail fans, and if you've listened to our other podcasts or you've read our writing, we've gone on about this before, but the time that we went up to La Jonction, you took me up there, I was new, and that feeling of going on a power hike up to the top, sitting on there, and first time I'd kind of in Europe, sat next to a glacier, even though it's receding. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And that was the moment we'd said about trail fans, we've got to do something about this. We've got to spread this magic to people, which is what we're trying to do with trail fans and this podcast. So I think that might not have happened anywhere else. It happened in that valley. It happened there. It might not have, that magic might not have, inspired us to do what we're doing now. If we'd have just gone up Pendle Hill, maybe, Pendle's pretty cool. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think for me also, being a fan of the sport as well, that to go there and to just be able to watch races without, just hiking up or running a bit, but just watch races and admire people, whether at the front of the pack or the middle of the pack, just going, oh my God, these people are living their dream, creating stories, creating adventures for themselves. For me also, the international side of it, I think to meet people from around the world there, you always want to discover places, but you also want to discover interesting people, like-minded people that might have something in common but might be completely different from you in many other ways. And I think UTMB provides a platform to do that as well. And I often meet up with friends from around the world when I'm there that I've met in other places, which is pretty magic. There's very few places on the planet where you can do that and feel good about it.
Yeah, so maybe we leave it with perhaps paradise isn't somewhere we arrive.
Definitely not. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Untold Trails, UTMB Chasing Paradise. We've enjoyed making it. We've enjoyed being out in the valley, living the dream again in Chamonix. And we will be releasing a bit more material around UTMB this year. We'll release the interview with the mayor and what may happen in and around Chamonix going forward around UTMB. And we'll also be putting out a few more bits on our socials. So watch out for that on Trail Farms and on Untold Trails. And stay tuned for the next episode of Untold Trails.
Untold Trails. Stories from the trails. Past, present, and what comes next.